Thank you.
Well, good evening. I'm Denise Mina, and I'm here to chair Hannah Lavery, who I've been calling Lafferty since I ever knew her. And I'm a writer, and I live in Glasgow, so hands across the ocean, I came to Edinburgh. And we're here tonight to discuss Hannah's collection, Blood, Salt, Spring, which is an amazing collection. Now, I appreciate that it's very cold, so if you feel moved, feel free to move to this area and do star jumps. Hannah, I'm sure most of you are aware, is the Macker of Edinburgh since September last year. She's the, whoa! She's the author of Lament for Sheku Bayoh, which I think is sort of most of our entry points, is how we kind of got to know her work particularly, and smaller collections as well.
Yep, one small pamphlet with stewed rhubarb as well. Yeah.
So this is an absolutely amazing collection. Could you tell us how you came to write this? Because it's quite an interesting story. Are you sitting on your...
I've got a microphone. Sorry. I forgot to use this. Here you go. What was that again? Sorry, here we go.
I have to tell you, first of all, the reason that I would always agree to chair Hannah is because she was hosting an event, and we both had very small children, and she got confused and catered the green room as if it was a children's party. So there were giant bowls of Haribo in the green room, and I thought, I don't know who's done this, but I really like this room.
And party rings, if I remember rightly.
It's party rings.
Yeah. Right, so Blood, Salt, Spring is, it's a collection of poems that were written. One section was written in lockdown, so this kind of responding to the kind of moment we've been through. And there's other poems there that are kind of older poems, and then there's poems that are looking forward to a kind of future that has some sort of sense of spring about it, I suppose. And it was, I suppose, what I wanted to do is what I was feeling when I was kind of putting this collection together, is I was feeling that we'd gone through this moment, especially as, you know, as a woman of colour, we've gone through this moment where a lot of our old wounds had been sort of torn open. And there was a demand almost, or an expectation from us to kind of articulate those wounds and to almost bleed publicly. And that felt that I wanted to talk about. In fact, I didn't think I could help but talk about that. And also through that time, I was in this incredible, and I can see that we've got people here, but I was in this incredible group, the Writers of Colour group. And it wasn't it, we met every week for a year on Zoom. And so through this whole time, I was meeting with these incredible writers, and we were talking about the way in which the pandemic, the way in which so much of the cultural and political discourses were affecting our personal lives and the way in which we experienced the world. And I so it came out of all of that, really.
Could you talk us through the three elements?
Yeah. So it starts off with a section called Blood. And really that was about, I suppose I've thought about that in different ways. I've thought about that in terms of old wounds. I've thought about that too, about the legacy that we carry, family. And I suppose also, I'm also sort of foregrounding what that is to live in this country, particularly with a kind of racialized identity and what that does to you. And then salt is really that, what I was saying, that salting of the wounds, and really, I suppose, really speaking to now. It's political, it's reflecting on some, but I think also it's a really for empathy maybe as well. I think I'm talking there about mothering through this time. I'm talking about witnessing, you know, kind of the silencing and having and those hesitations of trying to utter and then being silenced or not finding space for yourself. And then the spring section is moving into kind of claiming back my sort of more unique voice, the fact that actually what happened a lot within those discourses that we were kind of forced to sort of not choose a tribe, but we were forced to sort of talk about representation or to speak a kind of story that spoke of a wider story or wider. And actually, in the end of this collection, I was trying to just speak for myself. And I was trying to say that actually I can claim back my nuance and I can claim back my own individual story, and I don't have to represent anyone else but myself. And I think that's the journey through the collection, really.
Well, it's an absolutely amazing collection. I mean, it really blew me away. And one of the things that I loved about it, and I was saying to you, is it feels monumental and fleeting at the same time, because you've captured those times so well. How's this for a format? We were going to have Hannah read some poems, and then maybe we could come to the audience for questions. Then we could all do star jumps because it's freezing. Then Hannah's going to hand round party rings. No, so I thought maybe you could read a couple of poems. We can have a discussion if you would like to ask any questions. There are people watching who can't make it here. So if you have a question, think about it. If you have a question, say it and I'll repeat it so that everybody can hear it, and then Hannah can answer it. But would you read us? Would you read us some of your work just now?
So, oh, it's the wrong thing. I have to think about what's behind you.
Is yours marked? I've got mine here.
Yeah, I've got it all here. So should I read a couple, then maybe read a couple a bit later on? Is that the way to do it?
I'd love that,
So maybe what I'll do is I'm going to read a poem from the first section. Maybe two poems, the first section. So the first one I'm going to read. I'm actually not holding this at the same time. It's really... Sorry about that. The first one I'm going to read is called 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Eyes down, top deck, misstep, packy, misfit in two-step, count me in, count me out, match me up, hand me down, happy family. In the half-caste union, match your shade. Leave if you're the lightest, leave if you're the darkest, leave. Come in with that skin, we have hooks to hang it. We will make a whore of you yet. Put you there for the first timers, for the practice runs. Gaslight, harsh light, searchlight, no light, too light, no right. Take your folding chair and stack it by the door. Nan tells you about a sun so warm, she can still see it on your skin. And I think that poem really speaks for itself, I think. But I'm going to read a poem called Backwards. And it was interesting, I wrote this poem after listening to, I can't remember what it was, which is really annoying, but I was listening to a story about someone talking about growing up black in the north of England and ending up in remedial English. And I remember reading, I think it was Akala, I think, in his book also talked about that. So suddenly I realized that this experience that I thought was particularly to myself was actually a wider one. But also I think there was something about last year which kind of got me reflecting on institutions. I suppose this is mine about education. And so I grew up in Edinburgh in the 1980s, and I was put into a remedial English class when I was maybe about 6 or 7. And I remember at the time thinking that everyone in this class was brown, and I couldn't quite work out why I was there. It was very confusing to me why I was in this class, because I was a really avid reader, and English was my first language, and I didn't quite understand why I was in this room. And so and I kept remembering this story what I remember was them trying to teach me what a bee was. And they kept talking about it being a bat and a ball, and that really confused me because a bat and a ball both began with B, and I don't understand how that could end up being a D. And anyway, so this poem comes from that, and it's called Backwards. She corrals us brown kids into remedial, muted in our mothers' tongues, though here it's only my father they see. Months pass as Miss attempts to convince me that a D is made up of a bouncing ball and a bat. 2 B's make 1 D. A bouncing ball, is that not 3? Oh, I see now. This is where I lose my faith. My mother fights for me, screams, I don't belong, her mother tongue. She reads Anne of Green Gables. I do. Not that it matters. Or maybe it does. when in the playground with knees scuffed from falling. It matters not a jot, channeling Anne, for I'm on a pony and trap with Matthew, travelling the white way of delight, passing by the lake of shining waters. And those are not school railings, but the wild wood. And those are not spitting lads with sweaty cocks, but wild boar or Nazi soldiers running down the line. And I am not a girl. I am sea mist, the morning har, poison gas, floating between, dancing upon, bouncing my ball, swinging my fucking bat.
That was fantastic. That was fantastic. I was always in the Remy's, but that was because I was thick. Does anybody have any questions about those poems? Are there poets? There's a lot of poets here, aren't there? Yeah,
I can see. I can't see everybody. I realise that.
I know, we're quite blinded.
Descends into darkness.
It's just full. There's millions of people there. Hannah. One of the poems in that section really I found incredibly moving, and it was Leeds Cathedral. Would you mind reading Leeds Cathedral?
I will. Couldn't find it. Okay. Leeds Cathedral. My mum and I come down on the train from Dunbar. We get a priest to bless you. In the morgue, I weep over your body. With a broken voice, Mum calls you a stupid, bloody man. I light candles for you in Leeds Cathedral. Repeat ad infinitum.
Oh, that's so beautiful. You're writing so spare. What's your process?
Well, I think a lot of when I'm writing, I write a lot more, and then I cut back to find the core of what I'm doing. So I think for me, I'm always really interested in keeping it as fixed on the moment or the feeling. So I think there is a process of me, but I'm also really interested in rhythm and the way language and like just the kind of, I suppose I just quite like that sharp shock of language, I think. So yeah. So I think it is spare, I suppose.
Yeah, but really to the essence as well. And you there's a lot of other poets here, and I know that they don't all owe you money. So you're in quite a lot of group. You like to write in groups, don't you?
I do. I think I kind of. I was telling you the story, but I've got some of my writing mum friends here. So I started. Yeah, I think for me it's always been about trying to find community, and I think that I think I explore a lot of my work around other people, and I'm always really inspired by other people's writing and the way in which people respond to things. So I've always really kind of prioritized being in writing groups or trying to find community there. And maybe that's because I didn't do the sort of, the kind of masters in creative writing or any of that. So I suppose it's a way of me trying to create those little kind of creative or trying to find those like-minded people. But yeah, I definitely find workshops and workshop prompts and all of that stuff really useful. And I think it's also just because I have very little time as well, more now, but I 3 children. There's kind of knowing that you've got like 2 hours in a workshop can really, really focus the mind, and it can really kind of it takes away the terror, I think, of a blank page if you've just been like 10 minutes write this, and then obviously you'll spend a lot longer afterwards, kind of working and editing and getting it right. But being able to get those focusing in those little moments when you're around other people and responding to something and also you respond to prompts that you wouldn't have ever given yourself. Yeah. So I think, I'm definitely one for writing groups. I think they're really important.
With the Macker's position, it's not just an honorarium. There are a lot of duties, aren't there?
It's an interesting one because I think you get to sort of create your own kind of what you want to do with it. So, and it's still very early for me, but I'm definitely trying to look at kind of creating writing groups or kind of helping writing groups in the city and finding ways to celebrate that writing and those stories that are, I suppose, from the margins, the stories I don't always hear about this city. So I think I'm trying to use the makership for that. But it's a wonderful kind of privilege because you're given this, you are allowed to sort of hone it to what you want, like what you're interested in and what you can bring to it. I mean, I think there are definitely some poems I have to write through the year. But those are
Queen's birthday?
No, I don't think I do. Maybe, I don't know. I'll have to find out.
I would like to read your poem about the Queen's birthday.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, party rings.
Maybe, that's what we'd call it,
yeah,
party rings.
She would like a party ring.
That would be it.
Are there any questions? I don't want to hog, but we could talk for an hour. Are there any questions? Because I really can't see you.
No, I think we're very quiet.
No, you're very quiet. Oh, it's Edinburgh. That's why. Right, okay. Well, if you're Glaswegian and
someone's got one.
Oh, excellent.
I wonder, do you have a favourite poem or most meaningful poem of yourself in the book?
The question is, do you have? Is there a poem in the book that's most meaningful to you, or?
Well, I mean, there are lots in different days, but I mean, the collection I dedicated to my friend Baldina. So there is a poem about Baldina in the collection, which is probably the one that, that probably is the one that means the most to me in this collection. But there are lots of different, I think there's quite a lot. I think all of them probably mean something to me, but I think the one for Baldina is probably the most important to me in this collection at the moment.
And Baldina is a really significant Scottish artist. She did the music for the Lament, didn't she?
Yeah. And we'd kind of come together to create some. We were going to create a show around this collection as well, and we'd sort of started to do that in Push the Boat Out Festival with the support of the National Theatre of Scotland to create film poems. So, and we're going to have those film poems are being released next week. Through the National Theatre of Scotland and Push the Boat Out Festival. So that's wonderful that we have that, and she did the music for that and the underscore for that. But I'm really sad that we didn't get to do more of that together. But she was incredibly inspirational to me, and I think I talk about it in the book in the acknowledgements about how she gave me a real sense of belonging, and I think she always made me feel like I belonged, and that we had a really. I loved working with her. The work she did on Lament for Sheku Bayoh was incredible. So I really miss her.
It's being broadcast in New Zealand this week.
Yeah, it's going to the Auckland Arts Festival are showing the stream of it that we made. We made a digital version of it. So that's going out. I think it's next week or maybe even now. I'm not completely sure, but yes. So it's lovely to have that, to have her work like that. Recorded and
Now, quite a lot of these are explicitly about lockdown. Do you have a favourite one about lockdown? Because I don't know how other people feel, but I feel I'm forgetting lockdown almost as soon as it's passed. But it's so lovely to read poems that took me right back to that moment.
Well, there's a couple. I mean, there's ones about. Well, maybe I'll ask you. There's one about a Zoom workshop, which we all. That wasn't necessarily the most, wasn't as lovely as the Zoom workshops that I ran, for example, which I quite enjoy reading. And there's one about my son. So maybe I'll read both of them.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, so
definitely read the Zoom workshop one.
I'll read the Zoom workshop one, but I'll read this one. This is the thing when you've got a new book, you can't quite remember everything is. But this is. I'll read this one. Yeah, I will. Okay, I will. This is called Daily Exercise. Remember that? The Daily Exercise and Shopping Online. I've never gone from couch potato to 5K, except that one autumn. But I walk miles before breakfast. Yesterday he joined me, bouncing in as I readied myself for escape, his small hand in mine. We were back in time for his online meet. The faces of his class appear in squares, revealing so much. But it was that beach walk I returned to at 3 p.m. when suddenly I started to cry whilst writing a work email, just the standard, I hope this finds you. I told him as we were walking up the hill out of the estate that you should spend a part of each day looking up at the sky. When he asked me why, I wasn't sure how to say for perspective, to tell my child that he is so fleeting. His sister is doing a science lesson. Protecting the sofa feels too much of an effort, so she carries on reacting and refracting. I think about snoozing, but instead spend hours on my phone, grazing like a cow until he calls me in for my tea. In slippers I watch, the world slipping its moorings, browsing for flower.
Oh, that's fabulous. Thank you. That's fantastic.
And so in this, when I was putting this collection together, I was sort of trying to find different ways of creating poems. It's quite difficult in lockdown because you can't, like, you are sort of confined. So I signed up for loads and loads of workshops, and I did this one in particular. And I think it says something about writing workshops, but also I think it says something about that type of man who, let's just leave it there. So it's called Out With, Writing Workshop on Zoom. My headphones cancel the outside and bring in the sound of the sea. To think 3 of you are in snowdrifts and I'm here in this dampening place. I did not walk 4 miles to dig out my car, but my daughter came home with the dog and I picked her coat from the floor and hung it up on the peg. As they talk, I promise myself the woods. He tells us his window is open in that English city to let in the morning air. I worry that doing that here would bring in the har. She stutters through a poem and he looks away from his open window to his phone. I catch the edge of it as she talks of starlings. He acts the judge, an executioner, big man, showman. She offers a half-formed thought. It is beautiful. He develops it to bad exposure, gives it up as his glorious insight. She switches off the camera, thanking him for his cruelty. Taking the awkward silence as confession, he plays priest. He gives the good news. And I open another tab to read my emails. Out my window, my grandmother appears, walking with tigers. Oops. He calls me out. I smile, hiding my teeth, think to leave completely, but then she starts to talk about being a daughter, and the farmer speaks of love. And if I try hard to focus beyond this dodgy connection, I can almost make it out of this glare to her hell steps, to a wetland in a city, his willow coffin, and a rock with names etched in. But how do I tell them my grandmother has come and I don't want to be here anymore? As I think to tell the farmer I have fallen in love with his lover wrapped in a rainbow, he interrupts to tell us all what he has decided we are. Do you want the bad news? I promise myself the woods. The next day I'm undone. I am nothing but noise, but he brought my grandmother in from the har, and knowing he will see it as his victory, knowing she has been brought up here like bile, knowing all this, I let her dance for him. Her ink feet walk across the line.
Oh. What an astute moment for, because I'm really only bringing this up because there's so many writers here, to be a judged writer. I've not really heard other people talk about that, because we were talking earlier about estrogen and how estrogen is the cause of the voice in your head that says that's rubbish, shut up, nobody wants to hear from you, and that is that voice as well. But
what's really interesting is the poem that I wrote in that workshop that I talk about is probably one of the best in the book. But it was a really interesting, because and I suppose it's something about the kind of Zoom format as well, because it is that what I found interesting is that, especially in workshops and teaching, is that we went back to putting the teacher or that person kind of took a pedestal, like, because they were in control of who spoke, and they had all this. Whereas like in normal workshops, you have a bit more chance to move around. And but it was really interesting about how some people in those situations feel it's their job to tell you, this idea about this is what you are, this is what and that thing about having to create work that escapes from that. And I think in this book there's a lot about people trying to fix you, and I think this book is I suppose in a sense is kind of about that, as people try to fix your identity or fix what it is you're allowed to say or what it is they want to hear from you. So I think, that kind of poem is all about that, really, about what it is to, what it is to try and, I suppose, escape that voice. Whether fueled by estrogen or not, I don't know. but to escape that voice that sort of is really, it can be really, is really detrimental in some ways, isn't it? Though I did say to you that I wouldn't want to lose the wind your neck in voice as well.
No, I think it's healthy.
It is healthy, but yeah, I think that poem's definitely reflecting on that.
Can we talk about performance? About working with performers and creating things for performance. Do you feel page bound, or do you feel that a lot of your work is, because this feels like a real collection to me. Sometimes people who are performance poets basically write their scripts down, but this feels very textual.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's weird. I was saying to someone the other day, going, I don't know if I am a performance poet. Like often, I think to begin with, it was a space I found that I could. I didn't really. I mean, I had no idea how you became a poet, and I saw that there was these open mics. I thought, well, you can go there and you can be a poet. Like I think there's this thing when you start writing, where you're waiting for someone to tell you how to do it, or you're waiting for someone to give you permission, or you're trying, and so I literally just was like, oh, I can go to that place and read my poem. So I think maybe that's how I became a performance poet. And then of course I made a long piece of work. My first kind of The Drift was like a long form poem, or in a way, series of poems. So it's a weird label, the performance poet, because sometimes I think I get the spoken word or the performance poet label just because I'm brown, and it just sort of happens to you. But also I think I do love to perform my work, and I do enjoy. I was reading something about Roger Robinson, where he talked about like a poem is finished when it gets the audience respond to it. There's something about that. So I do kind of enjoy that, but I think my poems are probably too short to be kind of officially within that form. But I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I don't know if those labels feel really difficult to sort of wear in a way. Performance poet, page poet. I loved putting these poems on the page, and I thought a long time about how they would look and how that experience of reading them would be. So yeah, I suppose I started out, and I write for theatre, so I do love. Yeah. I love words being experienced live. I love experiencing poetry and stories that way. So it's a complicated.
Well, not to say that one's more valuable than the other, but sometimes when I'm reading performance poems, I hear it in the voice of the performer, but this I heard in my own voice or in imagined voices. So it felt very page. Do you know what I mean? It felt very much for the page for me.
Because I remember. I think it was a workshop we did recently. I'm just looking at it because I can see you. But I was talking recently about how sometimes I'll perform, some of these poems I'll perform, they will not, you couldn't sit with my book and read along, because I will change things because I've got a live audience. And so there is I think that's I quite enjoy about performance poetry, because the poems are still living, aren't they? You can still change, and I actually think you can still do that even if they've been put on a book. But well, I'm really glad you said that, because I did want this book to be something that, that I could perform and that could have that life, but would also have a life in your hand.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we want to get into what's more valuable, or I'm not for a minute, if there are performance poets here, I'm not for a minute saying one is more valid than the other. I'm just saying I just wonder, it feels as if you're working in two different forms.
I think so. I mean, I think, also because, I'm writing more and more for theatre, so I'm writing quite a lot of different forms at the moment. So, and I also think there was something about the lockdown, because we stopped. I was, like, before lockdown, I was performing a lot. Like, I was going around and performing poems a lot, and I'd be writing poems, particularly because I was like, oh, I've got a gig coming up, I want to write something that's going to, that'll be kind of funny, or be this, or be that. And actually, for this, I knew it was all of the poems that I was creating, and I knew that they were only going to, like, in that sense, I wasn't thinking of them having a life beyond being in the book, because that's what I had available. We didn't, we weren't doing a lot of gigs. I love the way we say gigs about poetry readings, don't we? Because it's like, every poet's a kind of wannabe rock star. And as we've realised, every rock star wants to be a poet recently.
I was going to say, that was a lovely poem, but it was no Bono.
No, so it wasn't Bono, was it? No. I think, is Jim Monaghan here? Jim, are you here? You did a really good version of that Bono poem that I saw. Was it Something St. Patrick? That was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you a bit more about working in theatre. Does that feel very different? What is the starting point there?
Do you know what? I think it's all for me, it's about image. It's all for me, it's about moments. So I think when I create theatre, in some ways it feels like it's coming from a similar place where I'm thinking about a kind of the build of moments, the focusing in. I mean, in some ways I'm quite early to theatre, because the theatre that I've done has all been very, like Lament for Sheku Bayoh was a long form poem. Yeah. So, but as I'm writing writing dialogue and characters as a whole, but I think it probably comes from a similar place, if I'm allowed to say. I know there's all these things you're supposed to do it this way and that way, but I think it's always coming from a similar place to me, which is about the kind of excitement I have for language and for rhythm, for the image that you want to or the moment or the emotion that you want to convey. So sometimes I think poetry and theatre is they're it's probably they're coming from much more the same place than, say, poetry and a novel is. I think like I think it is about distilling, and it is about creating it is about focusing on emotions and moments rather than plot, and so I think there's something the same in that, I think.
Well, I mean, I think one of the great things about being a woman writer is you're not going to be remembered.
Oh, that's true.
Someone's going to rip you off and get credit for your work. So you don't need to stay on brand. You can just do whatever you want. Just do whatever you fucking want.
Just walk through any door that's open.
That's
or
it.
Even half open.
That's right. That's right. Make sure you put a stone there and keep it open.
Well, it's funny though, because the thing about what people want to label people, I suppose it's so much of what this collection's about. It's like the resistance of being told what it is you are, and like actually you can be whatever you want.
What was that? There's a lot in this about Black Lives Matter. What was your experience of that? Because you were being wheeled out.
Oh, well, I did feel like that at times. I mean, it's difficult because part of me wants to speak.
Yeah.
And a lot of my work has been about like Scottish exceptionalism. It has been about the fact that we don't, that whole there's no problem here that we have in Scotland. So a lot of my work is focused on that. But there was a feeling that, and I'm sure a lot of writers of colour felt that you were you felt like suddenly you were being invited onto panels, or you're suddenly supposed to speak on stuff that though you had a kind of that you had to come with a kind of your personal. And though at the time you really wanted to do it, but also because of everything that it was also around that kind of Black Lives Matter. It was also the stuff around COVID where you knew that we didn't know why people of colour were more susceptible for dying from COVID. And there's all this, so there was lots of stuff being thrown at you, and you're all in isolation. So you didn't, and I think that's why like the Writers of Colour group was so important to me, because it was like every week I got to ground myself and be know that I wasn't experiencing this alone. Because I think otherwise it would have just been too much. And I think it is sometimes that people, there were a lot of people that wanted to educate themselves and to and that's wonderful, but it's hard if that means that you suddenly feel like you have to be the educator, or you have to then deal with people that seem to be like 5 miles or more behind you, and you're like, oh, like, can't we move on? Like, and you knew that conversation has been happening, there's work that's been happening for years and years and years, and I just felt lots of people were kind of starting way back,
catching up,
and it was and it was I don't even know if I fully processed what it was, and then also because I'm mixed race, so I have this weird, my hold on my own identity is quite. Fragile in a sense, so there is a thing of being I'm maybe not the right person to speak for, or maybe there's someone else who can speak more eloquently, or so you there's all this nervousness and hesitation, and so it was, and I think there was so much going on, and I also kind of had a sense that before we even fully articulated what we wanted to say, we were going to experience the backlash and we were going to be told to shut up, which is actually what's happened. You knew like, oh, we'll get, it was like, so there was a feeling of urgency. It was like, we're probably going to have to do this really quickly because it will be long before the conversation moves on, or before people realise this is a really difficult conversation. And then, so let's try and get this. So there was this kind of, there was very little time to sort of take a step back or to think about what it is you're saying yes to, or what it is you're trying to say, and so it was, I don't know if anyone agrees with me, but it felt very, like I said, the way I've put this book together, it definitely felt like you were sort of ripping open and kind of bleeding all over the place and salt being thrown on your open wounds, and it just felt very bruising and it was difficult.
Did you feel supported? Apart from the writers of colour?
As an individual, like what I have is I have this lovely family, and I've got a wonderful husband, and I've got I have got great friends. So I did have a lot of support around me, but there was also because you were on your own, like you didn't have access to your normal, networks, and so were you supported? I don't know. I don't know if you knew what you wanted. Like I don't know if I even knew what I needed. I think it's something afterwards you go, oh, I could have probably. But I think, I don't think I felt like I was, I don't know, it's a big question.
Well, I just think when Black Lives Matter happened, it was like another thing that people of colour had to do. Do you know what I mean? It was like, it just felt like white people just sort of stood, it was like the feminist movement when men just stood at the side holding handbags. It was like, but that's not really that helpful. We're all going to have to get involved, and we're going to have to find ways through this, but do you know what I mean?
Well, I think a lot of people got pushed to educate. I think a lot of people felt that was suddenly became their job, and I think I was lucky that didn't feel necessarily what I had to do. I mean, I was also, had the incredible privilege of making Lament for Sheku Bayoh through that time, so I had a real focus and a real, I felt very, a real motivation and duty to sort of honour that story and to get that information out there. So I did have a really strong focus. But I think what was probably difficult is there was a lot of people that I noticed that knew a lot more and had a lot more grounding, that I felt that they weren't necessarily coming into the conversation when they needed to, and I was like, that was a bit disappointing. But I also think this job of education isn't, I don't think it's like you said. I think wasn't. I was like, well, I know this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, don't really need to be part of this conversation. You could probably just work out this yourself.
Yeah. Read a fucking book, for example.
Yeah, and actually a lot of people did.
Yeah, they did.
Well, at least they bought a lot of books.
Why I'm not talking to...
I wonder how many of those are sitting in people's houses that never been opened. So that would be the next question. I mean, there was positives and there are... I think what I was writing about, particularly in this book, was about the bruising element of it. Yeah. I think I could probably speak on different days and in different moments where I might be like, oh, actually, a lot of great stuff was happening, but I think for me, I wanted to particularly talk about. I think I just wanted to say, well, come and sit by me and experience this with me.
Yes,
experience what it was like to be in an anti-racist working group. Experience what it was like to do.
It's so important to have that documented, because that will not get talked about, because there's so much. Do you know what I mean? It's very hard to, and poetry is the very place to talk about that. Would you read us one of those, the anti-racism working group? I don't know if that's one of your poems that you were going to read, but I'd love that.
I'm sitting on my books like this. What I'll do, God, I'm trying to hold this and look at the book. Can everyone hear me? I'm doing okay with this mic, aren't I? Right, good. What I'll do is
it's the Poetry Cops.
There we go.
I'll come to you for questions after this poem. I'm sorry for hogging.
So what I'm going to do is I might read the three that have kind of come in a section, which I kind of call them the hush section, which they'll have the anti-racism. So It starts off with a poem called Everyday Racism. I insist you take a snack with you. Remind you to wear a helmet. Fill your water bottle. Wait. Listen for the screech of your brakes as you cycle too fast at the corner. An hour or so passes. I've not been listening. I just watch her in the top right box of the Zoom room stare through a window out of shot. the light catching her blonde hair, and it's her view I'm imagining, where my stomach falls, like a fairground ride. But a long moment passes before I hear your bike drop. On our path, I leave them, their conversation continues, a drone under. I hold you, as I've always held you, letting you find that familiar comfort, that regulation in my hush now, hush now, hush now, hush now. Mum, they called me a hush now, hush now, hush. The anti-racist working group. They apologise for their lateness, and the one that should really be here won't be here. Don't worry, it's fine. This is the first meeting of the anti-racist working group. Adjective, befuddled. Unable to think clearly, confused or perplexed, even in my befuddled state, I could see the meant trouble. He worries that thinking of him like that is racist. Black? Her face, and my face. We share a look which even on Zoom we both recognise. Verb, past tense, befuddled, past participle, befuddled, make someone unable to think clearly. The logic used to arrive at this conclusion befuddles me. We arrange to meet, to talk after the meeting is done. We wonder why they thought they had anything useful to say. What were they thinking, she says. What the hell was the thinking? Befuddled, befuddle, befuddling. We sort of laugh. Wonder how long it will be before they move on. Wonder if they are starting to realise that they don't want to give anything away. Hush now, hush now, hush. Hush now, Shitty Brown. The parents were very sorry. This is not our son, not their son. It's mine. We will make sure they never change alone. Now only the supervised showing of skin. Her face flashes irritation at parents' evening. What a fuss I'm making. Looking past me, his parents, she tells me, say it's very unusual for him to act this way. Do you know his mother cried when she heard? We will supervise them now when they change for gym. This is not like our son, they say. I cry when he's asleep. After my white friend, you know, it's just what kids. This is not like our son. It's mine. It's my son, undressing by the teacher in fear. They will become again so unlike themselves.
Oh. That's beautiful. Are there any questions?
Oh, good.
Two. This gentleman here?
Me. I really enjoyed that, Hannah.
Oh, hi, John.
Especially the one about explaining to your son how to look up at the sky and find perspective and how that then makes you afraid. Explaining to him that he's impermanent. Do you read your poems to your kids? And do they respond, and does that change the poems?
It doesn't change the poems because they're kids.
Do you want just for the people on Zoom.
Oh yes, so
Could you repeat the question?
I was asked if I read the poems to my kids, and there was a poem in here which actually, it's really quick, so I'm going to read it. And there's a poem in here which I wrote for my son, and I'll tell you his reaction after I finish reading it to you. And it's called "The Poet and Her Son," and it's for Joseph. Some of you know Joseph. So. I let him in for a cuddle, and he calculates the area of the room. Tells me about prime numbers. You're a prime number, I say. Always so yourself. Imagine a chicken I do. She is beautiful. It lays 5 eggs. Speckled, brown, olive, white, blue. The farmer wants to divide his eggs into even groups. We're a unit of 5. What about Sam, our dog? Well then, we are 6, and you and I could be 2. Love you, Mummy. And he folds himself in. Love you, baby, I say, calculating the moment, multiplying it by division. So I wrote this poem for Joseph, and I read it to him, and he went, multiplying it by division? That makes no sense at all. So so that's the kind of reaction I get. So I mean, there's definitely poems I share. Like there's a poem in there called I Sang You Rainbow Songs, and so I had to speak to my kids about whether that was okay to put that poem in and if that was all right. And so there is a bit of a negotiation. But I gave birth to them, and so I feel like if I can, they owe me a poem at least. So yeah.
Was there somebody with their hand up at the back? Hello.
I wanted to ask you, Hannah, what you think will be the lasting kind of impact in the way that you write or lockdown? Because you did such intense work for Lament, and then this book is more specifically kind of lasered into the page. If you fast forward 3 to 5 years, what do you think will have been the legacy of this?
Oh, who knows? I mean, I'm kind of glad that I spoke about this moment. And I've said before that I actually think the unpacking this moment will be the work of our lives as artists. Like, I think we'll be, in fact, I don't know how you feel, but I almost find it difficult to read anything that doesn't acknowledge that we've been through this. Like, if I read fiction, I'm like, how can you not say that we've just been through this thing? And I think we've got, and also what's interesting, there's quite a lot of poems in there about climate change as well, and so there's other stuff going on in there and there's a poem in there about, called Spilt Milk, about Brexit. And there's also a poem called Fake News, and Fake News I wrote as a bit of a joke. Yeah. Like I wrote that poem, was like, when I wrote it I thought, this is almost a bit fantastic, it's a bit much. Now it feels like it was like a prophet. So there's I don't know what I honestly don't know. I felt there's definitely poems in here that speak beyond the moment, if that makes sense. But yeah, I don't know what so should I ask a question? Yeah, they're asking about.
Yeah, it's just how lockdown's affecting your work in the long term.
Yeah, well, I don't know how it'll affect our work in the long term. I think there's, and we're going through so many we're at this huge crossroads in history right now. And who knows what that is going to do to us as a society, but as artists, and as, I think it's yet to be understood.
Well, I hope you write more for the page, because I'm an antisocial bastard and I love reading poetry on my own.
Well, that's what I discovered. I quite like just staying in. Yeah, that's what I learned about myself.
That was just as well.
It was just as well. Yeah.
We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. Are there any other questions? Well, maybe Hannah would give us another poem. Yeah, give us another poem.
Well, I'm going to read you 2. One, oh God.
Should we just stay here tonight?
If it wasn't so cold,
make Hannah read us.
I'm going to read this poem called Lapwings. So I'm really lucky tonight that I've got 5. Is it 5? No, I'm the 5th person. There's 4 of us. I've got 4 of my wonderful friends from Dunbar that have come tonight. And Lapwings was a sort of poem written for Melissa, who isn't with us, but also probably speaks to. It's a bit for you too, Lisa, because we went for lots of walks by the beach, and all of you. In fact, it's for all of you. So it's for you lot. So it's called Lapwings. I walked with my friend along an empty beach. Sitting 2 meters apart, she told me her dreams. I told her mine. Together we missed our mothers, watched the lapwings in the salt marsh, the women swimming in the sea. So that's for you lot. And I think I'd quite like to end with reading, if I've got a couple of minutes, I think I'll end, I kind of want to read the poem for Baldina, but yeah, I think I'm going to read the poem for Baldina.
Yeah, please
if that's
do,
okay.
yeah.
And it's, So this is for Belle. Leaves fall gold. There is something divine in endings when God comes to sit with you. Leaves fall, gold on the ground. The day the call came, she is gone. I lay on my bedroom floor like a felled tree staring up at the irreplaceable. Should we cry out to the sky? Where should we take it, this pain? I stared at the empty sky. Where did she go until it dropped low enough to meet me in the December sun? And as the year closed, a bullfinch came to sit, beautiful orange, in the bare winter branch. I lit another candle to light up flat memory, but the sun cut in, leaving my ritual redundant. There is nothing more sacred than the new day. It's how I move forward now that she has become everything. The sky is so beautiful. Today I hear her laughter in it. I hear it all the time. I hear her in every line.
That's beautiful. Thank you. What a fantastic night. I would like you to give a gigantic round of applause to Hannah. Before you do, steady. Before you do, the book is on sale. She'll sign it. And if you have anything interesting to tell her, or
not interesting.
or not
It's fine,
interested,
whatever you want to say.
you want any contacts with any of these amazing groups that she's part of. But that said, thank you so much, Hannah Lavery. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you to you as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.